We are tariff exempt, so we're not being hit by any tariffs at this point. Which is good news. We did get hit on some of our ingredients from a Canadian retaliatory tariff standpoint, but the government of Canada just announced a few weeks ago that they're going to exempt certain industries and manufacturers in which we're included, at least
Hmm.
until I think the end of the year. So from a pure tariff standpoint, we're in the clear. Where I'd say it's having an impact is on a couple fronts. One is a lot of our business, as I mentioned in the last interview, about 70% of our business goes to the US. We're hearing anecdotally that some of our customers are looking at other suppliers, not to take away all of our business, but to diversify their portfolio across North America. But that hasn't occurred yet. It's like I said, it's more anecdotal tidbits that we're hearing. And then the second is, I mean, we're owned by a private equity firm, and you know, the strategy was to build a network of facilities, regardless if they were in Canada or the US, of bakery sites. I would say their investment perspective has changed where, they wanted a bit more balance now between the US and Canada so that, if we do enter into a tariff environment, they could potentially shift, sourcing strategy of products from one country to the next, whether it's advantageous or not to the company.
Hmm. That's really interesting to hear that. And so do you feel like maybe even if tariffs themselves don't have currently a lasting impact on your company, it sounds like it changed Canada-US relations in that
Yes.
maybe there's a recognized the need of the interdependence, but also that that relationship can't always be stable.
Yeah, I would say a lot of companies now are just looking at their supply chain in general and figuring out ways, you know, in terms of what does a contingency plan look like, both for companies in the US and for obviously companies in Canada. So, I think companies are just looking at options and and looking specifically at options closer to home.
From your perspective, does that what effect does that have on the sustainability of your business?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking just economic sustainability.
Oh, that's a good question. I guess let's start with the economic sustainability.
Yeah, from an economic sustainability standpoint, I mean, I think it puts a lot of pressure on our business to maintain our competitive advantage. Produce high quality product at a very competitive price, and we want to maintain that advantage so that we don't open up the door for someone else to grab our business. So it's putting pressure on the organization that way to continuously improve and have that mindset day in and day out.
Last time I think we were looking a little bit at the food waste angle. And so you mentioned that you felt at the time like there's going to be a lot of food waste caused by this. Do you have a sense of that now?
Yeah, I mean, we've had to donate quite a bit of product over the last month and a half, um, resulting from the situation with the tariffs where, we overproduced, our customers, they over forecasted their demand, and ultimately, we were left with a bunch of product in our warehouse. So, it I wouldn't say it's been too significant, but it's been something that we've had to work through. And I'm sure, I would say in the coming 4 or 5 months, we'll probably hear from our customers about, inventory in their warehouse that, ultimately they can't get through themselves based on how much they order during that time frame.
Hmm. And is that lag just because to this point, like it's in a warehouse, these things have a certain shelf life, and so at a certain point, like however many months before the best before date, you want to have it out the door.
Correct. Yeah, that's exactly how it plays out.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to hear that so much time and energy and effort went into this thing that no longer to this point from a legal perspective even applies to your business on the Canadian or the American side.
Yeah, I mean it's a little frustrating, I would say, and I think the impact that it's had is just on the investment psyche of individuals and institutions where People are thinking twice about investing in one country versus the next versus previously it felt like from a economic standpoint it was an open border, right? Where investment decisions could be made freely, and you weren't thinking too much whether you were placing money in the US or Canada.
And part of me wonders, like, people only have capacity for so much, and so when there's so much energy that's been spent on this and now is being spent to like recalculate those decisions, how much of that energy could have been spent thinking about food waste or optimizing for that, or thinking about how you can get more sustainable ingredients and optimizing for that, because those are the things that always push down the agenda when there's very urgent priorities that come in.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I could tell you that our procurement director has spent, a lot of his time figuring out, duty drawbacks, figuring out how to source, the equivalent ingredient, from Canadian manufacturer versus a US one versus looking at potential ways of reducing waste overall, having, better ingredients, more environmentally friendly packaging at play. So, exactly what you said. I think this has been time wasted that could have been spent in much more productive means during that time.
Is there anything else that you feel like would be relevant to share around tariffs and the impacts it's had or the impact it will have on the food system going forward?
You know, I think the biggest, I think I honestly don't think the impact's been felt by consumers to date. We talked about the lag. I think there's going to be an inflationary lag that's going to hit, and then I think a lot of the impacts on shelf and decisions that manufacturers have been made. That lag's probably only going to be felt in 6 to 7 months. So maybe we have another interview at that point and we can discuss.
To see what's going on
Yeah.
then. That's funny that the whole situation's resolved now, and then the impact will come in this time frame.
Yes.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I appreciate your insights, and I appreciate you doing this follow up interview.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right.